For more than 1,000 years, the walls always won. Think about what that truly means. For 10 long centuries across every kingdom and every empire, the same brutal law of war held firm. If a city built its walls high enough, thick enough, and clever enough, it could not be taken by force. An attacker could bring an army of 50,000 men. He could bring siege towers and battering rams and catapults. He could dig tunnels beneath the earth and hurl fire over the ramparts. And still, again and again, the stone won. A few hundred defenders standing behind a great wall could hold back a host many times their size, sometimes for months, sometimes for years. The wall was the master of war. It shaped where cities rose, how kings ruled, and who lived or died. And nowhere on earth were the walls greater than at Constantinople. The capital of the Roman Empire was ringed by the most formidable fortifications ever raised by human hands. A triple line of towering stone that had stood unbroken since the 5th century. Behind those walls, the last Romans had watched 1,000 years of invaders break and scatter like waves against a cliff. Attila and his Huns had turned away. The Avars and the Persians had failed. The Arabs had come twice with great fleets and great armies, and twice they had gone home defeated. The Bulgars, the Rus, army after army after army, all of them had looked upon those walls and understood that they were looking at something close to eternity. The people of the city believed with total conviction that God himself protected those walls and that they would stand until the end of the world. Then, in the spring of the year 1453, a young Ottoman sultan named Mehmed II arrived outside the city with an idea that would end the age of the wall forever. He did not bring a bigger army than the ones that had failed before. He did not bring more courage or more faith. He brought something entirely new. He brought a monster made of bronze. This is the history of the cannon, why the bronze beast that shattered every wall. To understand the cannon, we first have to understand the world it was born into and the ancient weapon that gave it life. That weapon was gunpowder. Centuries earlier, in the temples and mountain workshops of ancient China, scholars searching for a potion of eternal life had stumbled onto a black powder that burned with terrifying violence. Over generations, Chinese engineers transformed that powder from a curiosity into a tool of war. They strapped it to arrows, they packed it into bombs, and eventually they built the fire lance, a tube filled with powder that spat flame and debris into the faces of their enemies. Then someone did something that would echo through the rest of human history. They took that tube, made it out of metal, sealed one end, and placed a single, heavy projectile inside. When the powder exploded, it had nowhere to go but forward, and it hurled that projectile out with tremendous force. The fire lance had become a gun. One of the oldest surviving examples ever found is a small bronze hand cannon from China, cast around the year 1288. It is heavy, crude, and unmistakable. Nearly 800 years later, you would still know exactly what it is. That simple idea, a sealed metal tube, gunpowder, and a projectile, is the seed of every cannon that would ever be made. And carried westward by Mongol conquest and the long threads of trade, that seed reached Europe by the late 13th century. There, in the hands of Europe's kings and craftsmen, it would grow into something colossal. The first European cannons were small and almost laughably unreliable. One of the earliest known European drawings of a cannon comes from an English manuscript of the year 1326. It shows a strange, pot-bellied, vase-shaped device firing a large arrow-like bolt. These early guns were as dangerous to the men firing them as to the enemy. When cannons appeared on the battlefield in the year 1346, at a famous clash between England and France, they made a great deal of noise and smoke, and rather little else. Contemporaries were more impressed by the thunder than by the damage, but the men who worked with these guns understood something important. Noise was not the point, force was the point. And if you could make the tube bigger and the charge larger and the ball heavier, then that force could be aimed at the one thing that had defied armies for 1,000 years: the wall. So the cannons grew. Over the next century, European rulers poured fortunes into their guns, and the guns swelled into giants. These monsters were called bombards, enormous siege cannons built for a single purpose: to smash fortifications into rubble. And to understand why they mattered, you have to understand how they were made, because the story of the cannon is, at its heart, the story of metal. The very first great cannons were not cast in one piece. They were built almost like wooden barrels. Craftsmen took long strips or staves of wrought iron and arranged them in a circle to form a tube. Then they heated great iron hoops and hammered them over the outside, so that as the hoops cooled and shrank, they clamped the iron staves together into a single massive gun. This is actually where our word barrel comes from when we talk about the barrel of a gun, because the first ones were literally built like barrels. These hooped iron bombards could be made truly enormous, but they had a terrible weakness. They were built from many pieces held together by pressure, and gunpowder is a violent, unpredictable master. Every time one of these guns fired, the seams strained. Every so often, a bombard would not fire its ball forward at the enemy. Instead, it would burst apart, ripping itself to pieces and killing the men crewing it in an instant. Firing a great bombard was an act of faith almost as dangerous for the attacker as for the defender. There had to be a better way, and there was. It was called bronze. Bronze is an alloy, a mixture of copper and tin, and it had been used by human beings for thousands of years, but it had one property that made it perfect for the age of the cannon. Bronze can be melted into a liquid and poured. That meant a gunpounder could pour molten bronze into a mold and cast an entire cannon barrel as a single, seamless, unbroken piece of metal. Picture the process, because it was extraordinary. A master founder would first build a core, a long, precise rod that would form the hollow inside of the gun. Around it, he would build a mold of clay and other materials shaped exactly like the outside of the cannon, often decorated with royal crests, inscriptions, and the mouths of roaring beasts. Then he would heat copper and tin in a great furnace until they glowed and flowed like fire itself, and pour that liquid metal into the mold in one continuous, breathless rush. When it cooled and the mold was broken away, there stood a single mighty tube of bronze with no seams, no joints, and no weak points where the pressure could tear it apart. A cast bronze cannon was stronger, safer, and more reliable than the old hooped iron bombards. It could take a heavier charge of powder without bursting. It could be made beautiful as well as deadly, and kings loved to see their names and their coats of arms gleaming on the barrels of their guns. Gun founding became one of the most prized and secretive crafts in all of Europe, a strange and glorious blend of the sculptor, the blacksmith, and the alchemist. The greatest founders were courted by rulers and paid like princes. And it was one such founder, a man selling his terrible skill to the highest bidder, who would bring the age of the wall crashing down. His name, as it has come down to us, was Orban. He was a cannon founder, most likely from Hungary, and he possessed a rare and precious knowledge. He knew how to cast great guns in bronze. Around the year 1452, Orban first offered his services to the Christian emperor inside Constantinople, the very city those walls protected. But the dying Roman Empire was nearly bankrupt. It could not pay him what he asked, and it could not supply the vast quantities of bronze and materials his monstrous guns required. So Orban did what desperate, brilliant men have always done. He took his skills to the other side. He went to the young Ottoman Sultan, Mehmed II, and he made an astonishing boast. He claimed he could cast a cannon so powerful that its stone ball could bring down the very walls of Constantinople, the walls no army in 1,000 years had broken. Mehmed, who dreamed of nothing else but taking that city, gave Orban everything he wanted: money, workers, materials, whatever he needed. And Orban delivered. First he cast a large bronze gun, and it performed so well that Mehmed immediately ordered him to build one twice as large. What Orban created next was one of the most fearsome weapons the world had ever seen, a super-bombard of cast bronze, a gun so vast it seemed to belong to giants rather than men. Ancient accounts describe a barrel more than 25 feet long, with walls of bronze many inches thick. Its mouth gaped wide enough to swallow a carved stone ball weighing well over half a ton. Some accounts say 600 pounds or more. This single gun could not simply be wheeled into place. It had to be dragged across the countryside toward Constantinople by a team of 60 oxen, with hundreds of men marching alongside to steady it and to smooth the road ahead. It could be loaded and fired only a handful of times each day, and between each shot it had to rest, or the heat and strain would tear it apart. Some accounts say the crew poured warm oil over the metal to keep it from cracking in the cold. When it did fire, the results were beyond anything the defenders had ever imagined. When Orban's great cannon roared, witnesses said the sound could be heard for miles across the countryside. The ground shook. A vast cloud of smoke and fire erupted from its mouth, and a stone ball the weight of a small wagon came screaming through the air and slammed into walls that had stood since the days of ancient Rome, and the walls, which had defeated every army for 1,000 years, began to crack. For 55 days in the spring of 1453, the great gun and its many companions pounded the fortifications of Constantinople without mercy. The defenders fought with incredible courage. Each night they rushed into the breaches with timber, earth, and barrels, desperately trying to patch the wounds that the cannons had torn open by day. It was a race between stone and gunpowder, between 1,000 years of tradition and a single terrifying new idea. Gunpowder won. On the 29th of May in the year 1453, the Ottomans launched their final assault against walls that had been battered and broken by weeks of bombardment. The attackers poured through the shattered stone, and Constantinople fell. The Roman Empire, which in one form or another had endured for nearly 1,500 years, died that morning in a storm of smoke, rubble, and cannon fire. Stop and feel the weight of that moment. It was not just a city that fell, it was an idea. For 1,000 years, the wall had been the ultimate answer to the army. Now, in a single spring, a bronze beast had proven that no wall on earth was safe. Every king, every prince, every proud lord looking down from his high stone battlements suddenly understood a terrifying new truth. The walls that kept them safe, the walls that made them powerful, could now be smashed to pieces by a weapon that any wealthy ruler could buy. The world of the tall stone castle was over, and it had ended in a single, thunderous instant. If the walls of Constantinople had fallen to a slow, monstrous gun that could barely move, the next great shock came from the opposite direction, a cannon that could run. For the rest of the 15th century, European engineers worked feverishly to make their guns not just powerful, but mobile. And in the year 1494, the world saw the terrifying result. A French king named Charles VIII marched an army down into Italy, and with it, he brought something that stunned every observer on the peninsula. It was a train of mobile bronze cannons cast to a standardized design, mounted on wheeled carriages and pulled by horses rather than oxen, fast enough to keep pace with the marching army itself. Italy at the time was a land of proud, wealthy city-states protected by tall medieval walls, and those cities were accustomed to sieges that dragged on for months. When Charles arrived, that world collapsed almost overnight. Fortresses that had expected to hold out for an entire season fell in days. Some fell in mere hours. The French would simply roll their guns into position and open fire, and walls that had protected cities for generations came apart before the defenders could even organize a proper resistance. Italian writers described it as a kind of horror, as though the very rules of war had been rewritten while they slept. The message was now impossible to ignore, from Constantinople in the east to Italy in the west. The tall, thin, majestic walls of the medieval world, beautiful, ancient, and proud, were nothing but easy targets for the cannon. And so, faced with the bronze beast, the defenders of the world were forced to do something remarkable. They had to completely reinvent the wall itself. The old walls had been built tall and thin, designed to stop men with ladders and battering rams. Against cannon fire, that was exactly the wrong shape. A tall, thin wall presented a huge, brittle target that shattered under bombardment. So military engineers, especially in Italy, threw out 1,000 years of tradition and invented something entirely new. They built walls that were low and immensely thick. Instead of soaring stone, they packed great masses of earth behind sloping faces of brick, so that a cannonball would bury itself harmlessly in the dirt rather than shatter the wall. And they gave these new fortresses a strange and brilliant shape, pointed, angular bastions jutting outward like the points of a star. From these star-shaped points, the defenders could place their own cannons to sweep every possible line of attack with deadly crossfire, so that any enemy who came close would be caught in a storm of iron from multiple directions at once. These new fortifications became known as star forts, and they spread outward from Italy across the entire globe. The bronze beast had destroyed the old castle, but in doing so, it had given birth to an entirely new science of defense. War had become a contest between the gun and the geometry built to defeat it, a deadly conversation between attacker and defender that would continue for centuries. And you can still see the descendants of these star forts today, their sharp angular points preserved in old cities from Europe to the Americas to Asia. Before we push onward, because the cannon is about to leave the land entirely and conquer the sea, let me take just one quick moment. If you are enjoying this journey so far, please take a second right now to subscribe to Arsenal of Empires. This channel is devoted entirely to the weapons and the technologies that built and destroyed the great empires of history, the tools that quietly and sometimes violently rewrote the fate of the world. If you are finding this story as fascinating as we do, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and leave a comment telling us the moment that gripped you the most so far. Was it the great bronze gun at the gates of Constantinople, or the French cannons that shattered Italy in days? Your comments and likes genuinely help a growing channel like this one reach more people who love history. Now, let us follow the bronze beast out onto the open ocean. For all its power on land, the cannon was about to find a second home, one that would reshape the entire planet. That home was the wooden sailing ship. At first, cannons at sea were used much as they were on land, as tools to clear the enemy's deck of men before ships crashed together and sailors fought hand to hand. But over the course of the 16th century, a revolutionary idea took hold. What if the ship itself became the gun carriage? What if you lined the sides of a great wooden warship with rows of heavy cannons poking out through openings called gun ports, and used the whole vessel as a floating fortress of artillery? This was the birth of the Broadside. A single large warship could now carry dozens of cannons along each side. When it turned so that its flank faced the enemy, it could unleash all of those guns at once in a single, devastating volley. A broadside, pouring a storm of iron into an enemy hull at close range. A ship of war was no longer a platform for soldiers. It had become a swimming gun battery, and the sea had become a battlefield ruled by the cannon. The consequences were staggering. In the year 1588, when a mighty Spanish fleet, the famous Armada, sailed against England, the two sides fought a new kind of war. A war of guns and maneuver at sea, rather than boarding and hand-to-hand combat. And over the following centuries, the great naval powers of Europe built enormous wooden warships, the ships of the line, some carrying 100 cannons or more across multiple decks. These floating fortresses allowed a handful of nations perched on the edge of a single continent to project their power across every ocean on the planet. Think about what that meant. With cannons bolted to the sides of ships, European powers could sail thousands of miles from home, batter down the coastal defenses of distant kingdoms, and impose their will on peoples they had never met. The trading posts, the colonies, and the empires that spread across the globe in these centuries were built, in large part, on the back of naval artillery. The bronze beast, born to smash the walls of a single city, had become the tool that redrew the map of the entire world. Back on land, meanwhile, the cannon was undergoing its own quiet revolution. A revolution not of size, but of speed, discipline, and organization. The huge bombards that had shattered Constantinople were monsters, but they were slow, clumsy, and nearly impossible to move. Over time, gun founders and commanders realized that many smaller, lighter, faster cannons could be far more useful on a battlefield than a single giant. The challenge was learning how to move these guns quickly, aim them accurately, and fire them rapidly in the chaos of open battle. One of the great pioneers of this new way of war was a Swedish king named Gustavus Adolphus in the early 17th century. He drove his gun makers to produce lighter, more standardized field cannons, guns that could be moved and repositioned during a battle and fired quickly to support his marching infantry. Under commanders like him, artillery stopped being merely a tool for sieges and became a full partner on the open battlefield, tearing bloody gaps in enemy formations before the infantry ever closed in. And here, another change in metal quietly reshaped the world. Bronze had built the first great cannons, but bronze was expensive because copper and tin were costly and not always easy to find. Then gun founders, especially in England, mastered the art of casting cannons out of iron instead. Cast iron was more brittle and more dangerous than bronze, and it took real skill to cast a gun that would not burst. But iron was far, far cheaper and more plentiful, and that meant a nation could now afford not one great gun, but hundreds and hundreds of them. This was a turning point as important as any battle. Cheap iron cannons meant that artillery could be produced on a massive scale, enough to arm entire fleets and entire armies. The cannon was transformed from a rare and precious royal treasure into an industrial product, churned out by the hundreds to feed the endless wars of kings. The bronze beast still reigned as the most beautiful and prestigious of guns, but its cheaper iron cousins would come to fill the world. By the 18th century, artillery had become a true science. Perhaps the greatest example came from France, where an officer named Jean-Baptiste de Gribeauval created a brilliant new system for the army's guns. Instead of every cannon being a unique hand-built creation, Gribeauval standardized everything. Guns were made in a small number of fixed sizes. Their carriages, their tools, and their ammunition were made to match and made to be interchangeable. This meant that guns could be repaired quickly in the field, that crews could be trained in a uniform way, and that the whole system of artillery became faster, lighter, and far more efficient. It was this superb French artillery system that a young officer named Napoleon Bonaparte would inherit. And Napoleon was, above all else, a gunner. He had trained as an artillery officer, and he understood the power of massed cannon better than almost any commander in history. He famously used artillery not as a supporting weapon, but as a hammer. He would gather great batteries of guns, concentrate their fire on a single point in the enemy line, and blast a hole straight through it before sending in his infantry and cavalry to pour through the gap. It has often been said that Napoleon treated his cannon as the true god of the battlefield, and on field after field across Europe, that god delivered victory. The guns of Napoleon's age fired more than just solid iron balls. When enemy infantry drew close, a cannon could be loaded with canister, essentially a tin can packed with musket balls. When it fired, the can burst apart at the muzzle, and the cannon became a gigantic shotgun, spraying a lethal cloud of iron that could scythe down entire ranks of attacking men in a single blast. For the foot soldier of that era, few sights were more terrifying than an enemy cannon loaded with canister staring at him from across the field. And yet, for all this progress, the fundamental cannon had barely changed in its deepest design for centuries. It was still, essentially, Orban's idea, a smooth tube loaded from the front, firing a round ball using black powder that had scarcely changed since the days of the Chinese alchemists. The cannon of Napoleon would have been perfectly recognizable to a gunner standing before the walls of Constantinople 3.5 centuries earlier. Then in the 19th century, everything changed at last, and it changed with breathtaking speed. The first great transformation was rifling. For centuries, cannons had smooth barrels and they fired round balls that wobbled and tumbled unpredictably through the air. But engineers discovered that if you cut spiraling grooves into the inside of the barrel, those grooves would grip a specially shaped projectile and spin it as it flew, exactly like a well-thrown ball. A spinning projectile flies far straighter, far farther, and far more accurately. Rifled cannons firing elongated shells instead of round balls could suddenly hit targets at distances that the old smoothbore guns could never have dreamed of. The second great transformation was breech-loading. For their entire history, cannons had been loaded from the front, down the muzzle, a slow and awkward process, especially with a long, rifled barrel. Inventors now perfected ways to load the gun from the rear, the breech, sealing it tightly enough to contain the tremendous pressure of the blast. A breech-loading gun could be loaded and fired far more quickly, and its crew no longer had to expose themselves in front of the muzzle to reload. And behind these changes stood a new master of metal. Not bronze, not cast iron, but steel. In the second half of the 19th century, in Germany, a great manufacturing dynasty by the name of Krupp mastered the casting of enormous, immensely strong steel cannons. Steel could withstand pressures that would have burst any bronze bombard into fragments. Krupp's steel breech-loading guns and others like them across the industrializing world were more powerful, more accurate, and more durable than anything that had ever come before. On the battlefields of the later 19th century, these modern steel guns proved so devastating that they reshaped the balance of power between entire nations. With rifling, breech-loading, and steel, the cannon had finally shed its ancient skin. The beautiful bronze beast with its round stone balls and its muzzle loading and its clouds of black smoke faded into history. In its place rose the modern artillery piece, a precise, long-range, quick-firing weapon of steel. And in the early 20th century, that weapon reached a horrifying maturity. When the First World War erupted, the descendants of the cannon revealed just how terrible they had become. Massed batteries of modern artillery firing high-explosive shells by the millions turned entire landscapes into cratered wastelands of mud and death. Along the trenches of that war, the greatest killer was not the rifle and not the machine gun. It was the shell. The industrialized, steel and explosive descendant of Orban's bronze Bombard, raining down out of the sky in numbers beyond imagining. In some single battles, more shells were fired in a matter of days than had existed in the entire medieval world. The bronze beast that had cracked the walls of Constantinople had, over 5 centuries, grown into a weapon capable of erasing not just a wall, but an entire horizon. So let us step back and look at the whole astonishing arc of this story. It begins with a simple idea carried out of China on the tide of conquest and trade: a sealed tube, some gunpowder, and a heavy ball. In the hands of Europe's founders, that idea swelled into the great Bombards, and then into the mighty cast bronze cannon, the beast that finally answered the 1,000-year reign of the wall. At Constantinople in 1453, that beast ended an empire and closed the age of the castle forever. In Italy, it proved that no wall could stand before it. It forced the entire world to reinvent fortification itself, giving birth to the star forts. It climbed aboard the wooden warship and helped a handful of nations conquer the oceans and redraw the map of the globe. It became a science under Gribeauval and a god of battle under Napoleon. And finally, transformed by rifling, by the breech, and by steel, it shed its ancient bronze skin and became the modern artillery that would define the wars of the 20th century. For 1,000 years the wall was the master of war, and then, in a single spring morning, wrapped in smoke and thunder, a beast of bronze changed that law forever. No stone, however thick, however tall, however ancient, would ever again be truly safe. That is the history of the cannon, the bronze beast that shattered every wall. If you made it all the way to the end of this story, thank you. That truly means a lot. And if you have not yet subscribed to Arsenal of Empires, please take a moment to subscribe right now, especially if you are not already a subscriber. It genuinely makes an enormous difference for a growing channel like this one, and it means you will not miss the next chapter in the history of the weapons that shaped our world. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like so more history lovers can discover it, and leave a comment telling us which weapon or which empire you would like us to explore next. From the great bronze beast that ended the age of walls, thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one here on Arsenal of Empires.